My phone lit the bedroom in quick, frantic pulses. 63 missed calls. My parents' names stacked on top of each other, then my brother's, then the family group chat screaming for attention. A few weeks earlier, I would have reached for the phone without thinking. That night, I let it vibrate itself quiet on the nightstand and watched the screen go dark. This is a story created by the author of the Revenge Pulse channel for educational and inspirational purposes, and it does not portray any specific real-life individual. I lay still, listening to my own breathing, the dull ache in my hip keeping time. The silence felt earned. It hadn't come easy. The morning of my surgery had been loud with promises. My mother hovered at the hospital doors, voice full and certain, insisting she would stay with me for a full week, maybe longer, whatever it took. My father nodded along, chin lifted, declaring that family shows up when it counts. Their confidence wrapped around me like a blanket. I let myself believe it. My brother Luke breezed in late, phone already out, talking about fresh snow and the timing up north. Whistler had been on his mind for months. He spoke about connections and content and how this trip could change everything for him. Our parents beamed at the word future. I focused on the way my mother squeezed my hand and promised she'd be there when I woke up. She was, at first, back at my apartment. The third-floor walk-up felt steeper than it ever had. My mother guided me to the couch, lined up my medication, filled the fridge with soup, and kissed my forehead. She mentioned grabbing clothes and checking one quick thing before settling in. The door closed behind her with a soft click that didn't register as anything more than a pause. The pause stretched. By evening. My calls met voicemail. By night. The group chat stayed silent. Pain crept up in waves, sharp and bright. I balanced a glass of water on my knee and waited for the familiar sound of keys in the lock. Nothing. The next morning, Luke's name flashed on my screen at last. His voice came through casual and rushed, like I had caught him mid-laugh. He talked over my words, reminding me how strong I was, how I always handled things. The tone turned firm when I mentioned Mom's promise. He urged me not to make this harder than it needed to be. Everyone deserved a break. My father's message followed soon after. Short, commanding. Handle it like an adult. I stared at the phone until my hands stopped shaking. If you've ever been the reliable one, the fixer, the person everyone leans on, stay with me. What came next didn't happen all at once, but it started there, with a quiet decision I didn't announce. I chose not to chase them. I chose to watch what happened when I stopped holding everything together. The first night alone passed in short, broken pieces. Sleep came and went, chased off by pain that flared whenever I shifted wrong. I counted the hours by the glow of my phone, telling myself my mother would walk in any minute with a sheepish smile and a bag of groceries. Morning proved me wrong. The medication I needed sat on the top shelf in the kitchen, just high enough to make reaching it a risk. My leg throbbed as I leaned on my crutches, calculating the distance like it was a puzzle with consequences. The bottle stayed where it was. I backed away, breathing through the ache, and tapped my mother's name again, straight to voicemail. The family group chat blinked open, my message sitting alone beneath the cheerful title she had chosen before surgery. No typing bubble appeared. I watched the screen longer than I should have, then set the phone down as carefully as if it might break. By midday, hunger joined the pain. I ordered food, timing my steps, promising myself I could manage the short walk to the door. Halfway there, my leg buckled. I dropped to the floor, palms burning, teeth clenched against a sound I didn't want to make. The delivery bag waited outside until the picture notification faded from my phone. In the afternoon, my father finally responded. His voice came through tight and impatient, asking why I sounded upset. I explained the fall, the meds, the silence. The reply landed like a verdict. This wasn't an emergency. I needed to calm down. He reminded me that my mother had done her part and that I had always been capable. Luke's message followed soon after, full of breezy reassurance. He praised my resilience, joked that I bounced back from everything, and warned me not to stress Mom out while she was trying to enjoy herself. The word enjoy stuck with me. Evening settled in, quiet and heavy. I dragged myself back to the couch and stared at the ceiling, listening to my phone buzz with unrelated notifications. When I opened social media out of boredom more than hope, the truth arrived without warning. A photo filled the screen. Snow. Smiles. My parents standing close. Luke, front and center, arm raised like he had already won something. The caption talked about fresh starts and family time. The room felt smaller after that. I locked the phone and held it against my chest. The weight of it suddenly too much. I unlocked my phone again. Slower this time, like I was bracing for another fall. The photo hadn't changed, snow bright enough to hurt my eyes. My parents wrapped in matching jackets, Luke standing in front of them, grin sharp, arm lifted as if he were presenting the whole scene to an invisible audience. The caption talked about a family reset, about supporting Luke's next chapter. No mention of me, no mention of surgery, no mention of the third-floor walk-up where I was counting pills and breaths. I tapped Luke's name before I could talk myself out of it. His voice came through loud and careless, wind rushing in the background, someone laughing nearby. He sounded busy, important. When I tried to explain, the words tangled together about the fall, the meds I couldn't reach, Mom not coming back. The tone on the other end shifted. He cut in with a sigh that carried more irritation than concern. He reminded me how strong I was. He joked that I always landed on my feet. Then the edge appeared. This trip mattered. It had been planned for months. He told me not to turn everything into a crisis and ruin it for everyone. The conversation ended with a warning not to stress our parents out while they were finally enjoying themselves. I sat there with the phone still pressed to my ear long after the line went dead. I tried my mother next. She answered on the third ring, her voice tight, already defensive. Before I could finish a sentence, she talked over me, accusing me of exaggerating, of always needing something at the worst possible moment. She reminded me of how much she had done already. She asked if I had any idea how selfish I sounded right now. When I mentioned her promise, the word promise seemed to harden the air. She told me plans changed. She told me to be understanding. She told me I was an adult and needed to act like one. The call ended without a goodbye. My father didn't bother calling. A text arrived instead, blunt and final. Handle it like an adult. I pushed myself up to get water, my hands shaking with a mix of anger and pain. Halfway across the room, my crutch slipped on the edge of the rug. The world tilted. I hit the floor hard, the impact knocking the breath from my chest. For a few seconds, all I could do was lie there, cheek against the carpet, vision swimming. Later, at urgent care, a nurse with kind eyes helped me back into a chair. A doctor explained the risks in a calm, practiced voice. Another bad fall could have meant permanent damage. Losing mobility wasn't out of the question. I nodded and listened, my parents' smiling faces in Whistler replaying behind my eyes. Back home, I opened the family group chat and watched new messages pour in photos, jokes, updates about the snow. I didn't respond. If this story resonates, if you've ever been the one left to manage the aftermath, stay with me. That silence wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something they never saw coming. The apartment felt different after the fall. Not quieter, more honest. I opened the Notes app on my phone and titled a new page, Things I Don't Want to Forget. The cursor blinked. Waiting. I started with the date of my surgery. Then my mother's promise to stay a full week. Then the time the door closed behind her. My phone buzzed. A message from Luke slid onto the screen. Light and dismissive. He told me to stop spiraling. He reminded me how much pressure he was under. He suggested I rest and let things go. I added his words to the list. Another notification followed. This one from my father. He warned me not to create drama while the family was trying to reset. He wrote that stress wasn't good for my recovery. He advised me to be grateful. Grateful joined the list. The notes grew fast. I copied screenshots of unanswered calls. I wrote down the moment I saw Whistler on my screen. I recorded the nurse's calm explanation about permanent damage, the way her voice softened when she realized I was alone. I wrote until my hand cramped, until the ache in my hip faded behind something colder and clearer. Memories I had filed away as normal began to surface. The night my parents called in a panic because a bill hadn't gone through. My father's voice tight with anger. My mother crying that she didn't understand online accounts. I remembered opening my laptop, fixing it in minutes, telling myself it was temporary. A text from my mother popped up as if summoned by the thought. She accused me of making her look like a bad parent. She reminded me of all the sacrifices she'd made. She warned me not to turn the family against her. I didn't respond. I added it to the page. The pattern took shape, line by line. Every time I was hurt, someone else needed more. Every time I asked for help, I was told I could handle it. Strength wasn't a compliment anymore. It was a reason. I scrolled back through my notes, through dates and phrases and silences. The realization settled in quietly. They hadn't left because they didn't care. They left because they believed I would survive it without them. That belief had carried them for years. It had cost me more than pain. I saved the note, locked my phone, and let the truth sit with me. The next step didn't need anger. It needed clarity. I opened my email and typed the cabin's address into the search bar. The results stacked up instantly, neat and undeniable. Mortgage statements, insurance confirmations, utility notices. My name appeared again and again, calm and official, like it belonged there. The banking app took longer to load. When it did, the numbers told a story I had avoided reading for years. Monthly transfers labeled temporary. Shortfalls quietly covered. $4,000 here. $5,000 there. Always smoothed over before anyone noticed. Always from my account. I called my mother, needing to hear her voice against the evidence. She answered quickly this time, breathless and annoyed. The conversation turned sharp the moment I mentioned the cabin. She insisted everything was shared, that families didn't keep score. She reminded me how proud she was that I understood money better than the rest of them. That pride had teeth now. Luke texted while I was still staring at the screen. He wanted access to the spreadsheet I had built for the property expenses. He needed it for planning. He added a thumbs-up emoji, like that softened the demand. I typed back that the file would be exported and sent, but I wouldn't be maintaining it anymore. The response came fast and furious. He accused me of sabotaging him. He warned me that the cabin was part of his future, his brand, his momentum. He told me I was pulling the rug out from under him at the worst possible time. The truth settled heavier with every word. The place in Whistler wasn't just a getaway. It was valued at around $1,200,000, and my signature held it upright. Without me, the math didn't work. Without me, the image cracked. My father called next. His voice carried the edge he used when he wanted obedience. He framed the situation as a misunderstanding. He reminded me that my name was there because I had agreed to help. He implied that backing out now would be a betrayal. I listened and scrolled. Autopay confirmations, insurance renewals, my credit score propping up their comfort. The realization arrived without drama. I wasn't reacting to one cruel week. I was standing inside 7 years of quiet responsibility. They hadn't built a life with me. They had built it on me. When the call ended, I opened a new email and addressed it to a small law firm with a plain website. I attached the documents, the statements, the proof. My message stayed simple. I needed to know how to remove myself without destroying my own future. Hitting send didn't feel like revenge. It felt like finally setting something down. The attorney's voice came through my laptop speakers, calm and unhurried, the kind of tone built for bad news and clean exits. He walked me through my options without judgment. As a co-owner, I had rights. As a co-signer, I had exposure. None of it required permission. I mentioned the surgery, the fall, the trip. He paused just long enough for the silence to register, then explained the path forward. Buyout at fair market value or a forced sale. Immediate removal from joint accounts. Written notice. Deadlines. Consequences. The word consequences landed differently when it wasn't being thrown at me. After the call, I opened the banking portals one by one. My card information disappeared from autopays I had set up years ago just for now. Each confirmation page felt like a small release. I forwarded copies to the attorney, building a paper trail I should have built long ago. My phone rang halfway through. My mother's name filled the screen. Her voice arrived sharp and incredulous, demanding to know why the electric company had sent a warning. She reminded me I handled those things. She insisted it had to be a mistake. I explained, evenly, that I wasn't handling it anymore. I told her she owned the house and could set up her own payments. The response came back laced with accusation. She called me unreasonable. She called me cruel. She called me family. I ended the call and sent her the customer service number. My father tried next. Louder. Angrier. He framed my actions as disloyalty. He warned me about burning bridges. He promised there would be consequences if I kept going down this path. I listened until the threats circled back on themselves, then closed the conversation. For the first time, I didn't rush to smooth anything over. An email from the attorney arrived before dinner. Formal notices were ready. The clock had started. My parents and Luke had a window to buy me out at fair value. If they couldn't, the property would go on the market. I leaned back against the couch, my hip aching, my hands steady. The structure that had held them up was gone. What remained was mine. My father arrived without warning. The knock was sharp and impatient, the kind that assumed compliance. I opened the door slowly, leaning into my crutch, and watched his eyes flick to the stack of papers on my coffee table. He stepped inside as if invited and held up a letter, fingers tight around the edges. His voice filled the room, loud and certain, demanding an explanation. The word betrayal came out early, followed by family, followed by consequences. He spoke as though volume could bend facts back into place. I waited until his breath hitched, then answered with the calm I'd practiced. The notice wasn't a threat, it was a choice. Buy me out at fair market value or sell. No more payments. No more cover. His face hardened. He warned me about what this would cost. He talked about loyalty and shame, about how people would see me. He leaned closer and promised that if I went through with it, I would no longer be welcome. Dead to us landed like a verdict meant to crush. I didn't raise my voice. I told him they had already left me that way. My mother called while he was still standing there, her name flashing insistently. I put the phone on speaker. Her words tumbled out fast and wet, accusing me of cruelty, of breaking her heart, of humiliating her in front of Luke. She reminded me of sleepless nights and sacrifices, of everything she believed she had earned. I answered with the same steady truth. Being a parent didn't include abandoning a child after surgery. Love didn't come with invoices. Silence followed, thick and stunned. Luke's messages started buzzing through before the call ended. He demanded access to the spreadsheets. He claimed I was sabotaging his future. He framed the cabin as his livelihood, his momentum, his proof that he mattered. Each line assumed I would cave. I didn't. I told him the files were his responsibility now. I told him to hire help. I told him I was done being the back office for dreams I wasn't allowed to have. My father stared at me like he was seeing a stranger. He repeated the threat one last time, slower, like a lesson. I held the door open until he understood the conversation was over. When the door closed, the room felt lighter. If you've ever been told love was conditional, stay with me. What happened next proved how fragile their certainty had always been. The messages changed tone within days. My mother's voice notes lost their fury and gained urgency. She talked about bills arriving out of order, about confusion with accounts she thought were handled. She asked why the lights flickered that morning, why the bank needed more documents. Each question carried the same expectation I would fix it. I didn't. My father tried again. This time, measured, almost reasonable. He framed the situation as a misunderstanding that could still be corrected. He reminded me how difficult refinancing would be without my income attached. He warned me the market was unstable. His concern wasn't subtle. Losing the cabin meant losing control. Luke's panic came through in bursts. Texts stacked up about missed deadlines, about sponsors asking questions, about content plans falling apart. He blamed stress. He blamed timing. He blamed me for pulling support without warning, as if 7 years of quiet help had never counted. I muted the thread and turned my phone face down. That evening, a knock came from downstairs. Miguel, the neighbor I barely knew beyond polite hellos, stood there with a grocery bag and an awkward smile. He mentioned his mother's rule about checking on people who were hurt. He set the bag on the counter and didn't wait for thanks. Later, a coworker sent a message asking if I needed anything. Another offered rides until I could walk better. None of them asked for access to my accounts. None of them mentioned loyalty. The attorney's email arrived the next morning. The listing paperwork was ready. Interest was already there. Without my credit, my parents couldn't buy me out. The only path left was selling. My phone buzzed again, my mother's name lighting up the screen. I let it ring. The quiet held. The weight that had lived in my chest for years loosened, just enough for me to breathe. The confirmation email arrived on a Tuesday morning, plain and efficient. The cabin in Whistler had sold. My share of the proceeds would be wired by end of day. No congratulations, no commentary. Just numbers moving where they were finally supposed to go. My mother called an hour later. Her voice sounded softer than it had in weeks, wrapped in memory instead of accusation. She talked about winters by the fireplace, about how the place never felt the same without everyone together. She mentioned how hard this had been on the family. The word sorry never appeared. I listened once, all the way through, then let the call end on its own. Luke texted that night. One line. He wrote that things had fallen apart faster than he expected. There was no demand attached, no plan for me to fix it. I didn't reply. The wire landed before sunset. I watched the balance update, steady and real. That money didn't feel like winning. It felt like proof. Proof that boundaries have weight. Proof that responsibility without respect is just another form of silence. A week later, I moved into a smaller apartment with an elevator and wide hallways. Miguel helped carry a box without asking what happened. A friend brought takeout and stayed long enough to make me laugh. These were small gestures, but they came without conditions. My phone buzzed again while I was unpacking. The family group chat lit up with another message. I turned the screen face down and kept folding clothes. If this story feels familiar, if you've ever been cast as the strong one and punished for needing help, you're not alone. Stay with this space. Share your thoughts if you want. Sometimes the most powerful choice isn't walking away loudly, but choosing yourself quietly. I placed the phone in a drawer and closed it. The room settled. For the first time in a long while, everything I was holding belonged to me.